So here we have a dining table with the clarity of a Steinway piano. This high gloss lacquered finish is brilliant. It's something that most people aren't going to be able to produce, and I'm going to show you some of the tips that I use to produce these kind of finishes on most of the furniture that I sell here at the Resplendent Crow. This finish is not always easy to do with your lighter colors, but your blacks, reds, blues, your deep greens, deep blues look amazing. Pinks, things like that. So I'll show you some of the buffing secrets, some of the wet sanding secrets, and the things that I do to get a finish that looks this awesome. All right, so what we got here is we got this jet black table, and this is a piece that we lacquered a while back, and the customer wasn't happy with the ease with which they could scratch it, right? Dining tables take a lot of abuse, so we came up with a new way to take care of this top, and we've got a process that we're trying that's going to make this a much better situation for that customer. But the first thing we've got to do is we have to wet sand and polish this top so we can make it beautiful. We're going to make this thing gleam like a Steinway piano, and I'll show you guys exactly how I do this and the steps that I take to make this thing go from looking okay to just being absolutely insane. So for starters, we're definitely going to need some kind of a sander. These Festal sanders are awesome. They're very torquey. They start slow, they end, or they start slow, they stop fast, so they don't just keep spinning when you turn them off. So these are badass. And of course, we're gonna need some different kinds of paper for the wet sanding. So we've got 800, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. So we're gonna use all of those. We're gonna get a squirt bottle with a little bit of soapy water. We're gonna squirt this thing down, and then we're gonna start sanding away till we can knock down any of these imperfections that we have here on our top. All right, so you want to pay attention to this. I've done my first round, or my first passes of 800 grit, okay? You can see that the paper has a lot of dust on it, right? Shake that dust off there. We're taking off quite a bit of paint, right? And we're working on all those imperfections. When you spray lacquer, you're not laying it very flat. Even though gravity is going to carry it down, right? The solvents are going to come out, you're going to be left with the solids. It's not nearly as flat as you think it is, which is why when you wet sand and polish it, it looks like a mirror. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab a rag. I've just got these dirty rags all over the place. And what we have is we have a lot of paint on the surfaces from where the water has trapped that paint, right? The sanded paint. So we're going to wipe this thing off. It's just black as can be, right? There's all kinds of stuff on there. So we want to get all that off, right? Now what we can do is we can actually look at our top. Come down here, see all this? This is shiny stuff. We need to get all that out along here, all that stuff. That stuff was what makes your finish not as brilliant as it should be. All along there, see all that shine? All that needs to come out. If I come over here, kind of look in the center, got a couple of spots here. That's not shiny, not really, that's just the light. We're looking right along here, so I can get a better picture of it. Right in here you can see we've got low spots as well. And right over here, same thing, low spots, low spots. You can really see them along the rim right there, or the edge, I should say. So we need to sand all that stuff out, and then we can move on to our next grit, which is going to be 1,000. So another thing I should say about this process is you have to have enough lacquer on your cabinet or your whatever you're working on to make this thing work. So we generally put 2 generous, if not 3, coats of lacquer on almost everything that we paint. because you just can't build up those coats enough to make it nice and glossy and to smooth out any imperfections. So it's really important that you know how much lacquer's on your part, because if you don't, you can burn through it, and if you burn through it, you're done. Like there's no going back, you're just gonna end up respraying. So if you're unsure about how much lacquer you have on there, you know, you're gonna have to use the force. All right, so now we're moving on to the buffing phase. And what we're gonna do to buff this thing is we're gonna go and put some of this Wizards Turbo Cut on here, and I'll put links to all this stuff down below. But anyway, this stuff's gonna remove your 1200 to 1500 swirl marks and your sanding marks, and stuff works really good. It's not expensive, it smells amazing. So anyway, the way I start is I just put a little bit of this stuff on here. You can always add more, so just a little bit. And I'm gonna kind of work an area here to where I'm happy with it. Now the lacquer's gonna get hot as you're buffing this thing up. People don't think about this, but as that stuff gets hotter, it tends to scratch easier, it tends to have, you end up doing more work. So work it a little bit, move over to another section. Work this section, and finally work your last section, and then come back to where you were before. And that'll give that lacquer time to cool off so that you're not just, you know, doing extra work. So I got a little DeWalt 8-inch buffer, and I use kind of about, I don't know, like 1500 somewhere in there as far as the RPMs go. I've got a link to my pads. These are turbo pads. They're different than the 3M ones that everyone's kind of familiar with. Again, I'll put links to all this stuff down below. So I'm gonna start, just kind of spread this stuff out just a tiny bit. And stuff's gonna slosh over here. I don't care. We got more work to do on this, which we're gonna get to later in the video. So we'll get started here. And I'm gonna go slow. And I'm not really looking for anything at this point. I'm just kind of working this thing with even line speed. I want to go maybe, I don't know, 1 foot per second. And what I'm doing is I'm waiting for this buffer to start to get kind of torquey, where I really have to hold on to it in order to get it to rotate. Sometimes it might start to bounce a little bit as well, but I'm just gonna start working this thing, and as I start to feel it grab a little bit, I know that my compound's kind of wearing out. So I'll just kind of finish up this pass, then I'm gonna go ahead. That's good, I'm done. I can feel it, it's warm, right? So now I'm gonna move on to my next patch. Take my turbo cut, same deal. I'm just put a little bit on here. Of course, we're gonna overlap just a tiny bit, that's okay. Just kind of move this compound around. Same deal, aim for about 1 foot per second. 1 alligator, 2 alligator, 3 alligator, 4 alligator, 5 alligator. Now, if you get any compound that's left over along here, we're just gonna go ahead and wipe that off with a rag. A little bit of damp rag takes that stuff right off. You don't want that stuff to build up and cook, because it'll turn into a really hard spot. Another tip is when you're on your edges, don't let your buffing wheel go over more than maybe, I don't know, a third at the most, because you can potentially burn your lacquer. You don't want to do that. Then you're trying to do a touch-up, or worst case scenario, you're repaint. And I can feel this thing starting to grab, so I know my compound is kind of not doing much anymore. I'm just down to the pad. I'll come in here and see if I can show you what we're kind of looking at. You can see all kinds of marks in our finish, right? This is the stuff that we're starting to get out. We're getting a lot of clarity as to what the sandpaper, that 2000 grit sandpaper, has left as far as sanding marks. You can see when I put my hand on here, I can create marks, right? So we're gonna keep working this down with this turbo cut until we get that nice uniform black finish that we're looking for. All right, so I got the first buffing application done. I'm gonna wipe this thing off and just kind of make sure that there's nothing crazy going on here. And I'm gonna use the light as I look across the surface here to see if I see anything other than maybe some swirl marks from my buffer. I don't want to see any scratches from my sander. Once I know that I don't have any scratches, I can go ahead and I can move on to the next step, which is going to be a machine polish, which is going to get rid of the swirl marks from our last buffing process. All right, so quick discussion about buffing pads. Okay, I got a couple pads here. This is the one everyone's probably familiar with. This is going to be your 3M pad. These pads are going to come in different colors that correspond with the different kinds of compounds that 3M sells. They work pretty good. They're awesome. Once these little humps here start to kind of get a little bit flat, you need to get rid of these things. But pads can be washed, you know, 4, 5, 6 times and reused. So you just put them in the washer, wash them real good. I always put them on heavy, and then don't dry them. Just put them in an open basket, let those things air dry, and you can reuse them again. The other pad that I have here is a Turbo Buff pad, and these pads are all-purpose pads. You can use them for any kind of compounds, and truth is I like these a lot better. They just have this little hook and loop deal here, whereas the 3M pad definitely grabs better. It has a much larger area for grabbing. This one's very small, but they work fantastic. And I don't believe they cost nearly as much as the 3M ones, and I honestly don't have the price. So I'll put links to all this stuff down below. But anyway, they're cool. So if you're looking for a pad, try these Turbo Buff ones, and you know, let me know how they work. Okay, now we're on to the machine polish stage. Okay, so this is basically going to take all of the swirl marks from the compounds that we were just buffing on, and it's going to remove all those. So that is one more layer of clarity on our table here. So for this particular process, I went ahead and I added another pad. I have tons of pads. I'll show you all my pads in a minute. But anyway, I go through these things constantly. So we're going to go ahead and just like we did before. What we're actually going to do on this one, because we're not running a very long span, like a lot of our dressers are like 80 inches. This we're looking at like 44 inches, I believe. So we're going to run this thing all the way along here like so and work this stuff. And again, what we're looking for is we're looking for that buffer to start to get kind of torquey, right? It doesn't spin as easily. It means we've gone through all that compound. We're going to do the same thing. We'll probably do maybe 2 or 3 passes with this to get all these swirl marks out. And this thing should really start to look like a mirror. The only thing we should be left with is basically a faint haze from the compound here. So let's get after it. So just like before, I'm stuck here at about 1,500 RPMs. You can go up if you want, but I don't like to burn anything. I like to keep it cool. So we spread this stuff out, and we're just going to start in a corner to start working this thing. Line speed's the same, about 1 foot per second. It's kind of what I aim for. I'm going to overlap, you know, about 25%. Okay. So we'll call that good for this first pass. As we look along this, most of those swirl marks are gone. This thing's looking fantastic. We can see we got a little bit of hazing still, right? Which again, we're going to take that off with our final polish. This thing's looking pretty good. I'm going to run one more pass on it, and I think we're done. Now, this is actually, it's pretty good for me, so I like this. All right, the final thing I'm going to use is this butter wet wax. It's basically just a shining polish that's going to go on here. It's going to take off all the existing hazing. Any hazing that's left from our buffer, from our regular polishing compounds, it's going to get rid of that. It's going to get rid of all of that. And again, the consistency is almost like water. So when you put it on, you kind of want to be careful. Don't slosh that shit all over the place because it'll literally go everywhere. I've done it many times. So anyway, just put a little bit on here like I've got like so, and then we're going to put our buffer on. We're just going to work our buffer all the way along here. And this is the fastest of all the passes. You might go 1 complete pass, maybe 2 complete passes, and you're going to be done. The final product is what you're going to have. All right, battery died. Now I got a fresh battery in. Okay, so now we're going to run this along here, do maybe 1 or 2 passes, and that's going to be it. You shouldn't have to wipe this thing down. You shouldn't have to polish it out by hand. This is all we're going to get. Same as before, I'm running this thing at 1,500 RPMs. Do about 25% overlap, and this thing is just coming out beautifully. It's perfect. So I've got four of these leaves to do, and I've already wet sanded and polished them, so now I basically just need to do the top polish and then the waxing. And then this thing's done, I'll start stacking these things in on our dining table.